So it's the end, almost the end of the day. Then you can all get back in your conventional combustion engine vehicles or electric vehicles or flying taxis if you're actually future focused. So my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO of the 311 Institute and I'm a futurist. So I actually do a couple of different things. I look at two futures. I look at what we kind of regard as the near future, which is the next 20 years, which is where I work with all of the brands that you're using now, the ones that are in your pocket, the ones that are in your hands, and the ones that you are using everywhere. So companies like Adobe, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Samsung, Arm, all these kinds of guys. But I also look at deeper futures. Now, deeper futures are typically 30 to 50 years out, and I do that because I work with all G20 governments, and one of them, at the moment, the United States, we are now designing the future transportation systems as part of their $1 trillion Department of Transportation bill. And actually, when we start talking about the future of transportation as it relates to the US, we see lots of different vehicles, formats, powertrains, all that kind of stuff. But one of the conversations that's dominating some of the US conversations is what happens when your city is underwater. So when we talk about the future of mobility and transportation, it's not always as clear-cut as we think. Now, this is my preferred vehicle. It's a DeLorean 2026. So obviously, when I'm trying to prepare these presentations, I get into my time-traveling car, go to the future, and I bring that knowledge back to you. So this one is obviously powered by plasma engines, not lithium-ion batteries, and it uses anti-gravity technology. But you won't see this in the dealership anytime soon. Now, when we actually have a look at the future, if we step back 10 years ago, things were moving quite quickly. And when I typically ask the question, do we think that we're moving faster today than we did 10 years ago? The majority of people think we're moving faster today, from a technology perspective, a society perspective, business, industry perspective, and so on and so forth. So when you are trying to look at the future and bring it back home as it relates to your own businesses, you've got less time to see what's going to happen, plan and adapt. That's problem number one. The future is also more complex. So how many of you know the car industry? Hands up. And by the way, if you keep your hands down, what are you doing here, right? How many of you really think you know the automotive manufacturers whose products most of you are actually selling and servicing? I'm going to upend your view of them. So when we talk about the future being complex, we're not just talking about cars that drive themselves or don't, or lithium-powered cars. We're talking a lot more. So as we start having a look at a transportation revolution, you might all feel threatened. You might see the future as this kind of risky place that you don't necessarily understand, and you might see the future as something that's being done to you, in some cases by the manufacturers that you represent. So one American manufacturer a couple of weeks ago said to its dealer network, we want you to sell more electric vehicles, and these are our conditions. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to, but if you don't do what we're asking you to do, we will buy your franchise back from you for $200,000. Now, for dealers who've actually been in the industry for some cases decades, me saying, I'll give you $200,000 to walk away, that's quite galling. So how do we start putting the ball back in your court and taking it to a degree out of the manufacturer's court? When we have a look at emerging technologies, it's estimated by ARK Investment that emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, all these kinds of things will destroy up to $50 trillion worth of GDP. We're already seeing this. In the oil and gas industry, we're moving to renewables. In the agricultural industry, we're moving to new ways of producing food. In the car and the automotive industry, we are moving from one way of manufacturing vehicles, selling and servicing vehicles, to a different kind of model. But it's also estimated that these emerging technologies will bring about $210 trillion worth of new opportunity. So don't focus on the top one, focus on the bottom opportunity. Now, when we start talking about the end of the status quo, as a futurist, I bought a Tesla. I have 2 cars. I have a Range Rover, and I have to put it into the dealership pretty much every 8 months for brakes, servicing, brake change, oil changes, all this kind of stuff. Costing me an arm and a leg. The Tesla is 30 months old. I bought it online. I never talked to a dealer. I never did a test drive. I've changed 2 tyres, and because of brake regeneration technology, I do wonder whether or not I ever need to change the brakes. And when we have a look at Formula E, for example, where a lot of the manufacturers are playing, brake regeneration technologies are now 99% efficient. So as we look to this switch to EVs with no combustion engines, I know a lot of dealers are saying, well, our main opportunity is tyres, wiring and wiring chassis, and brakes. Don't count too much on being able to service brakes. You will need to, but not as much as you might think, because brake regen is getting a lot better. Now, here's a quiz for you. Is NIO a car company? So you can put your hands up there. So, a little bit of a quiz. So, who thinks NIO is a car company? Okay. Who thinks they are a food company? You have no hands, right? Am I right? There's no one putting their hands up for that. No one. Right. How many of you think NIO is a lifestyle company? Any hands up? Yeah, a couple of hands up there. None of you said a food company. When I say I'm going to fundamentally change how you see the car industry and the car manufacturers, do you know that NIO does all of that and a lot more? Do you know that they sell over 1 million SKUs of food via their super app? NIO is increasingly not a car company. NIO is a multi-sided platform that leverages its super app to sell food, lifestyle products, connected home services, financial services. So when we talk about the car companies of the future, you need to very carefully think about what you're talking about. Now, when we talk about some of the future fundamentals, this is kind of what you're up against in the next 10 years. This is why you need to start making the changes to your business now, not in 8 years' time when you suddenly realize that your business is on the brink. We will reach electric vehicle cost parity with internal combustion engines by 2026. We are already seeing the development of 1 million and 4 million mile lithium-ion batteries, which means I could buy a vehicle today or rent a vehicle or buy it as a service, and I could literally have a car for life. So the average age of most vehicles now is about 7 years. Pandemic is stretching it a little bit. This is the first example of being able to buy a vehicle that could outlive me. When we have a look at this, 2027, TCOs basically are going to beat ICE. So we're already kind of at the point, basically, where the total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle, depending on the brand, is actually better than the total cost of ownership for an internal combustion engine vehicle. So from a consumer perspective, this means that I start buying it because it makes more economic sense. So in the UK, I was working with the UK government, and they said, well, when we talk about the future of transportation, what about poor people? Bearing in mind that poor people are obviously generally left out of future technologies and developments. With an electric vehicle, increasingly you can pay 30% less insurance on an EV than an ICE car. When we have a look at diesel prices and petrol prices, my Tesla costs pretty much nothing to actually fuel. When we have a look at the TCO, basically engines, servicing, brake wear and tear and everything else, increasingly electric vehicles make economic sense to the people that you are trying to sell vehicles to. By 50%, it's estimated that over half of the cars that are actually on the roads will be EVs. By 2030, if you are still selling internal combustion engine vehicles and your businesses are still reliant on ICE, you're going to be struggling more and more. And then, of course, this one, France, India, China, Germany flip-flops because obviously a lot of the big car manufacturers are based in Germany, the UK. By the year 2035, over half the world's population will not be able to buy a car with an internal combustion engine, even if they wanted to. At this point, really 2030, sales of ICE cars will just start plummeting. But when we talk about EVs, we need triple the electricity that we generate today. So it's not always straightforward. Now, when we have a look at things like the basics, on the one hand, we can see everything going autonomous. At the moment, we're at level 3 with the likes of Mercedes. But organizations like Ford and Volkswagen have recently unwound a $2.5 billion investment in Argo AI, because as the car manufacturers are finding out, developing a vehicle that drives itself in all conditions, that's as good as a human in bad conditions, is really difficult. So within the car company, we call this the 90% of the 90% problem. So getting a car to drive itself, doing that first 90%, that's easy. But then you have to spend 10 times more effort trying to get that last 10%. Trying to produce a car that understands that a shadow on the road isn't a boulder, or what happens when a deer passes in front of it, or when it snows, or whatever it happens to be. And this is the challenge that car manufacturers as well as regulators have had, because trying to get to that 100% efficiency, where it is perfect, is insanely costly and difficult. So these won't be around for a while, but they are still coming. Now, if I take the steering wheel, the dashboard and the pedals out of a car, do I have a car any longer? Or do I have a pod, a blank space? Organizations like Toyota and Audi can already see the literal death of the car, which means that their entire businesses are built on selling these things that essentially are coming to an end. But when we start having a look beyond the internal combustion engine, there's a lot going on. So we're moving to battery electric vehicles. In Japan, we have fuel cell electric vehicles with the likes of Toyota, who still are pushing hydrogen. We've got hybrid electric vehicles as well. But this is the Terzo Millennio. It's a Lamborghini that has been designed by both Lamborghini and MIT in the US. This is a batteryless hypercar. This particular car stores all of the electricity it needs in the shell. There are no lithium-ion batteries in this, and it's not the first. So if you think basically that the future of EVs is always going to be lithium-ion batteries, it's not. So when we have a look at the future of energy, because the future of energy and the future of transportation is interlinked, what we have is we've got biofuels. So we're trying to hit net zero. So you have organizations like Shell that are investing heavily in biofuels and sustainable fuels. In Europe, we are now, partly because of the Russian crisis, we are now using artificial photosynthesis to make diesel, so that's the diesel that you would put in your car, from the air. It's carbon neutral. These are called solar fuels. But when we start having a look at things like renewables, basically we've got hydro, geothermal, and solar, and a bunch of other stuff. But the ones you pay attention to basically are solar. So when we have a look at photovoltaic materials, we have a little surprise in store, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. And then when we have a look at wireless energy, if my electric vehicle has a surplus of electricity, I can simply share that to the car behind using blockchain. So when I start saying that the future of automotive manufacturers is not what you think, let's get busy. So firstly, there is a car manufacturer in the US called Daymac. Your cars increasingly have more in common with my smartphone than the cars of ancient times. In fact, a lot of people are saying that cars today are more smartphones on wheels than cars. Now, cars that drive themselves, whether it's level 3, autonomous or whatever, they are packed full of GPUs and computing power. So Daymac uses all of the surplus computing power within their cars to mine cryptocurrency. So traditionally, I buy a car, it's a depreciating asset, and in 10 years' time, I kind of sell it for a lot less money than I bought it. What happens when I buy a car, or rent a car, or whatever I'm up to, and that car, as it's driving around, as it's parked up on my street, is actually making me actual money. This works, by the way. Your car can literally make you money. We've got cars like this from Big Rep. This is a fully electric, fully autonomous vehicle that was designed by an artificial intelligence and 3D printed. Organizations like General Motors are increasingly 3D printing not just parts, but 3D printing entire chassis and vehicle assemblies. In fact, Ford recently used an artificial intelligence to cut over 50 kilograms of weight from its vehicles to make them more fuel efficient. So increasingly, we are making cars in new ways. What would happen if in your dealership you could just 3D print a new car? And Big Rep aren't the only ones. We've got companies like Otto, who 3D print autonomous buses. Could you make your own vehicles? Mercedes, as well as a lot of other organizations, basically they're looking at keeping the chassis the same, but then switching out the modules on top. So in the morning, the Mercedes is a commuter vehicle. Take kids to school in it. At lunchtime, it's a delivery vehicle. And then in the afternoon, it's something else. So these vehicle chassis come into a distribution center, and robotics just swap the chassis, and then off the vehicle goes. So when you start messing around with the format of vehicles, it opens up new business opportunities, and I'm going to come to those. This is the BMW iVision. They want to produce it by 2030. It is completely recyclable. This car is not soldered together. It's glued. Even the badge has been laser etched onto it. This is a car made out of new materials that is designed to be completely disassembled, repurposed into anything from Adidas trainers to another car. Maybe a Mercedes, that'd be ironic. Now, when we start having a look at business shifts, today, basically, we're kind of used to this concept of transport moves people and goods around. But increasingly, and this is where the car manufacturers salivate, increasingly we are doing mobility as a service. We're seeing this with different vendors. It's like Waymo, for example, are rolling out. Chrysler are now massively rolling out their level 3 sort of semi-autonomous driving fleets. But you also have mobile services. Now, what we mean by mobile services is if you have a vehicle that is a blank space inside, you can provide a variety of different services. Literally, services that are mobile. So this is the new future business model. But in addition to that, and I work with a lot of car manufacturers, in the future, there will be no car companies. And the reason why there will be no car companies is because they will be this. They will be multi-sided super app technology companies that also make vehicles, sell vehicles, provide vehicles as a service and all this sort of stuff. So just like Neo, once I start owning the customer, if I download a Mercedes app, what is stopping me from buying food from Mercedes, entertainment from Mercedes, insurance from Mercedes, whatever? So all of the car manufacturers have been looking at platforms like WhatsApp and WeChat and thinking, why don't we just move into all these other markets and industries? And that is why they want to own the customer. Because with you, they will make a certain amount of money. But this model, this takes them into markets worth tens of trillions of dollars, basically, that they've never ever been able to play in before. So I'll give you some examples. Hyundai will become an energy utility because we see solar panels on cars. We have this with Lightyear 1, Toyota, BMW, Hyundai. If you put solar panels onto a car, this car now generates its own electricity. Toyota, Hyundai, and others become electricity generators. So what do we do with that? Well, if you're BMW, you can wirelessly transmit the electricity that your car has generated while it's been out and about, and you can wirelessly transmit that energy to the truck behind you, to the car in front of you. And if you use blockchain technology, you have something called peer-to-peer energy charging, which means if I'm in this vehicle and this is my vehicle, when it's charging your vehicle, just like we wirelessly charge phones, I can charge you money. In addition to that, Tesla. Is Tesla a car company? They're a virtual power plant company. So the batteries in these Teslas, you plug them in at home and they provide boost power to your house. So you can start running your house from an electricity perspective from your Tesla. Now in California, when the local energy grids need more energy, Tesla has done a deal with PCGE. And as a Tesla owner, I get an alert and it says, plug your Tesla into your house now, and the surplus electricity that's in your car will now be sold to the Californian electricity grid, and you will get some money. And Tesla gets a chunk as well. Tesla are already doing this, look it up. In addition to this, the reason why Teslas are already fitted with full self-driving sensors even though the regulators and everyone else are telling them it's not, is because Tesla knows that when we get level 4, level 5 fully autonomous driving, they push a software update to this vehicle. And now it's a robo-taxi. And again, Tesla takes some of that money. But the car that sits on my driveway for 95% of the time now goes off and picks you all up. So I make some money, Tesla makes some money. My car is no longer really a depreciating asset. Tesla, the comms company. When we have a look at the future of connected cars, Tesla and SpaceX own Starlink. At the moment, this vehicle will connect to the local mobile networks. But just you watch. Now that we have low Earth orbit satellites in space that can connect these vehicles, that will be connected to Starlink at some point. For Elon Musk, connecting these vehicles to his satellite network is worth $36 billion. And as Tesla, I could then take out a Tesla broadband package and I get rid of my local telecoms provider. So when we start talking about some of the things that car companies are doing, there's a whole hunk of other things. Office as a service. If in Helsinki we can't get office space, why don't I just go to Hyundai and say, hey, can I rent a mobile office? Audi have the long distance lounge concept. So I go to Audi and say, hey, I need a meeting room right now. And they go, yeah, we'll just send you one. It'll be out the front. Meeting room as a service in a vehicle that moves itself around. This is from Aprilia. I've been talking to Disney about these. These are hotel rooms as a service. This is a sort of basic one. But organizations like Disney are thinking about using these because I can book my Disney holiday and Disney can send a self-driving car to pick me up. But the bigger versions of these literally plug into the Disney hotels. So they're called autonomous travel suites. It's my hotel suite. And I literally get out of my own hotel suite. But this also starts upsetting the airline industry. Because do I take an overnight aircraft or do I take an overnight hotel room as a service? Adidas, autonomous shop that comes to your neighborhood as a service. So this starts affecting the future of retail. Does Toyota take a cut? That this kind of concept is based on things like the Toyota e-pallet concept. Do I need to rent retail space when I can really just rent a shop as a service and it just turns up to whatever neighborhood I want it to turn up to? This one's a fun one, Citroën. So this, and they have a lot of these concepts, this is the skate. This one is an autonomous gym. That's it. So if I want to work out while I'm going to work, I get in here and there are rowing machines and all that kind of stuff. So at what point do we start seeing Citroën saying, we are going to provide gym as a service? There's even a company that's talking about sauna as a service. I've been working, a little while ago I was working with the Finnish government and we talked about the future of smart cities and transportation and everything else. And I said, the problem with saunas basically is that you're going to have to disinfect them. And the Finnish Minister of Transport said, no, you don't. When you go into a sauna, because of the heat, it kills all the bugs. That's it. So you could literally have sauna as a service. So if you don't have a sauna at home, dial it up. So when we start talking about future business models, these are the kind of things that the manufacturers are looking at because they're going, today we sell you a car and service it. Tomorrow, we sell you everything else. Food, shop as a service, office as a service, you name it. This is all worth a lot of money and this is what they're salivating about. This is why when we have a look at some of the European negotiations, why do you think a lot of the car manufacturers want to own the customer data? Because if they have the data, they know what you're up to. Now, future dealerships. So today, basically, you buy and sell cars and keep them running, generally. That's probably, 80% of your business. You put financing on top of that, but generally, this is where all your money is coming from today. Now, 81% of dealers around the world, especially Europe, agree that dealership business models need to change. 63% of users will buy cars online. Some of you have more than likely bought cars online. I bought a car online, it was fine. I got all the servicing and everything else. So the first thing that you need to do as dealers and dealership networks, basically as people who are in the automotive industry, is this. You digitize everything. Everything. The reason for this is because when you are a digital business, firstly, you can improve operations, you can understand your customers more and everything else. But when you digitize your business, it allows you to move into new markets quicker. This is an agility play. This is not just me saying digitize for the sake of it. Now, to put this into context, when I was having a look at future dealership business models with companies like Accenture, McKinsey, BCG, Bain & Co. Their general advice to dealers was digitize your business, get closer to your customer. That was it. That's where they ended. That applies to every single business on the planet. That's useless. So I'm giving you some actual advice. Now, when we start talking about things like online configurators, this is an online configurator. This is actually a game engine that Audi have been using to create photorealistic configurators. And you can't really tell that it's not a real car. So for the moment, digitize every part of your existing business. You can do some fancy stuff around the edges like this, etc., etc. But this is just a game engine. We've not had to do anything like that. Now, this is Audi's vision of the dealership of the future, which I think is comical. So what you do is you go into an Audi dealership and then you put on a virtual reality headset and then you can test drive and get in the cars that are actually right slap bang next to you. Now, from a manufacturer perspective, when we start having a look at the next sort of 10 years, manufacturers are going to say to you, as dealers, you are very, very important to us and to our network, and we've worked with you for many, many years, and we have your best interests at heart. Many automotive manufacturers are in a transition period from going from selling and servicing traditional cars to selling stuff as a service. And at some point, these manufacturers are likely to start saying, thank you for selling our product for the past 100 years. We're now all online or whatever they're up to. But yeah, I mean, can you see that in your dealership? Look, he's sat next to a car. She loves that vehicle, whatever she's in. Thank you, Audi. So, action number 2. So you need to move from a showroom perspective, you need to move from showrooms to stores. Now, what I mean here is literally, you have space. And I've spoken to a lot of dealers basically that say, we used to have lots of people coming into the showroom, but now we sit there and our salespeople twiddle their thumbs for quite a lot of the day. And, occasionally someone comes in and sees us. You have land, you have facilities and real estate and everything else. Start making better use of it. Now, some examples are conference centers, customization centers. So we heard earlier from Eliza basically about the personalization generation. Did you know that more people want to customize their products and personalize their products than ever before? It boosts your margins by 65%. And if you customize someone's product, even if it's a car, we've seen that they are 75% more likely to be loyal to you. And they're more likely to recommend you to all their friends. But how many of you actually offer genuine customize anything that you like centers? EV charging centers. At the moment, if I do have an electric vehicle, I don't go to a dealership. That's it. But you've already got EV charging infrastructure, generally. Why aren't you making money off that? It's sat there. Sports and gaming centres. So when we start talking about esports, this is where we talk about community hubs. Education and training centres. You train your own staff, but generally you probably send quite a lot of, depending on the dealer, you probably send quite a lot of your staff somewhere else to be certified and trained. Do that in-house. Now, when you sort of look at this, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's all stupid. You are not the only industry being disrupted. You're not the only industry that is seeing significant Titanic level change. Move from showrooms to spaces. Now, next, prepare for an EV future. It is coming whether you like it or not. If the governments are banning the sale of internal combustion engines, in 2036, you could be the most die-hard dealership saying, we are only selling cars with an internal combustion engine, but I don't know where you're going to buy those from, because whether it's Volkswagen or Audi or Ford or Chrysler or anyone else, Toyota, Volvo, they are all switching to EVs because the regulations demand it and because the net zero Paris agreements demand it. So prepare for an EV future because it's coming. You will hate it, but it's coming. So equipment investment, rebranding. So have you thought about rebranding your dealerships? Increasingly, a lot of younger generations are purpose-led. If I know that you take sustainability seriously, that helps with your branding. But this is all on the path to a different journey. And then staff certification and training, get everyone trained up. Most people, when you have a look at the surveys, most dealerships don't really know how to sell EVs. The people basically within them are a little bit shaky, etc., etc. Prepare for an EV future. It is coming whether you like it or not. Now, when we start talking about new business models, because that was about laying your foundation, okay? That's all that was. That's just making your business a little bit more future-proof, but laying the right foundation for you to now go and expand into doing new things. Over the past 18 months, as dealers, how many new products have you introduced? If the answer is 0, how are you preparing for the future where you are being disrupted and where your industry is changing? How much of your company have you reinvented? If your company today looks like the company that it was 10 to 20 years ago, and you haven't reinvented anything about your company, except maybe a bit of digitization in the CRM system, then you're not moving the dial on trying to move into new market opportunities. Now, when we talk about reinvention, one of the things you can do, for example, is you can put a target in place. You can say, right, next year, 5% of our revenues will come from installing electric vehicle charging stations, for example. So the way you start moving is just little steps. And can you prove that you can move at speed? If I showed you the biggest opportunity on the planet and said, this is the opportunity right now, could you move into that opportunity tomorrow? Or is it going to take you a few years, by which point, basically, that opportunity is gone? This is one of the reasons why you digitize your business, because if you spot a new opportunity, you can move into it at speed. That is what the biggest companies on the planet do. They spot an opportunity, they spin up basically some new products, they push it out basically via their digital channels, done. New subscribers. Now, when we have a look at OEMs, this is what the OEMs are up to. So companies like Mercedes and Volvo, basically, and GM and Ford and everything else. This is what they're up to. This is their business model. So firstly, they are going to be selling things direct to businesses, also direct to consumers. They are increasingly going to sell digital products and services. This is ambiguous because these digital products and services can be anything. It could be entertainment. It could be different purchases. It could be e-commerce. They're going to be selling mobile products and services. Office as a service. And they have a super app first strategy. Increasingly, they will become multi-sided super app technology companies who also sell mobile stuff. They're opening up new ecosystems because they are partnering, because they don't have in-house expertise for particular things, so they're partnering like crazy. And of course, they're going omni-channel. But the car manufacturers of the future are exclusively digital. Now, from a dealer perspective, these car companies are going to want your customer data. They're going to want you to actually do the difficult stuff, but then essentially hand you the customer information. I've worked in distribution, I've worked in system integration, and everything else. I know the play. It's not unique. So, these are some of the business models basically that you can actually embrace. Firstly, why don't you become your own certification provider? You own the certification. You can do this. Why do you send your staff to somewhere else to get certified? There is actually a staggering amount of money in becoming the certification provider, where you go, we now have a Pendragon green tick for our staff, or whatever it happens to be. Certification and training centers. It's not just cars that are changing, semi-trucks are changing, drones are changing, cargo ships are changing, rockets are changing, aircraft are changing. You are not the only transportation industry that is going through seismic change. Certification and training centers. You know that sort of part of the showroom that you don't really use? Get that in there. Component distribution. Component distribution is really an incremental play. But when we actually have a look at the component suppliers to the automotive industry, the average BMW has 30,000 parts. But future EVs don't have 30,000 parts. So the entire distribution supply chain is actually changing. Now, what happens if you start selling the batteries, the wiring harnesses, the brakes and everything else? It's an incremental play, but this actually starts taking you outside of your existing business area. Everything is a subscription. Everything is a subscription. So what I do is I don't buy a Mercedes as a subscription. I buy whatever your brand name is as a subscription. Because now you can say, we will provide, as part of our package, our everything as a service package, we will provide you with electric vehicle charging credits. We will provide you with insurance credits. We will supply you with actual insurance. Do not start selling, say, Mercedes as a service. Sell your own brand as a service. And the reason I say that is because it allows you then to add anything in you like. Because like Neo, you can say, would you like food delivery as a service? Pizza as a service? You can add it all in. Think about becoming fleet operators. If you own the asset, or if your title is on the asset, then you start disintermediating some of the manufacturers, because now what you do is you are the fleet operators, and as part of the everything is a subscription, I buy self-driving car as a subscription. But it's yours. So now you're becoming a large customer of the OEMs, but you own the customer relationship and you now can start selling other things. Remote diagnostics and services, short-term leasing and rental. Now when we start looking outside the core, a lot of you, if not all of you, are already selling electric vehicles, right? How many of you are selling electric vehicle installation services? Because when I bought my Tesla, I had to go to a traditional electrician's and say, hello, can I spend £1,500 with you to install the charger? Why aren't you doing that? The way to get into that is you find a local EV installation company and you say, we would like to partner with you, and you take some commission. That's where you start. As electric vehicle sales grow, eventually you have your own EV installation company. But we are all going from gas at home to electric and everything else. Now you can become a renewable energy installation company, a connected home installation company. This all opens up opportunities everywhere for you. Mobility solution providers. I don't rent Mercedes as an office. I rent whatever your brand name is as an office, okay? Become mobility integrators. You know the transportation industry, you know the car industry. How many of you actually go to corporate companies and say, we will advise you on the best companies to partner with for your vehicle needs? So, mobility integrators and consultants. This is outside the core, but this is kind of what you do already, but in a more professional corporate setting, because you're going to businesses now, typically, as well as governments. And then, when you are digitizing your company, build an app. Because any time you now do something new as a subscription, you can put it straight into the app. So I open the app today, and I see that you've added food as a service, hotel as a service. Okay? This is why you have to digitize. Option 2, longer term business model, but it's a medium risk. As we start seeing moving from level 3 to level 5, delivery and logistics services. You could take on Deliveroo if you really wanted to. Lifestyle services like Neo, move outside the core. Rideshare, robo-taxi operators. Tesla's going to become a robo-taxi operator. They're just going to flick a switch and off they go. If you run the fleet, this is why all of this joins up. If you run the fleet, you can be the robo-taxi operator. You're taking money. It's your asset. You now own the customer. Vehicle module swap shops. If Mercedes are going to, for example, swap one chassis to another, can't you go to Mercedes and say, well, we'll be a dealer for you, but we will also be the place that you can bring your modular vehicles in to swap the chassis. Saves Mercedes or whoever else it is money. And there's money in that. Option 3, longer term, higher risk. Second life specialists. We have huge amounts of lithium-ion batteries that are going to be end of life. They need recycling, some of them. Some of them need selling. So question, did you know that Mercedes is already in the energy industry? Mercedes have been taking the used lithium-ion batteries from their vehicles and putting them into data centers in Germany so that if the power goes out to those data centers, Mercedes now provides grid-scale storage services to the German data center industry. That's a true one. They've been doing that for years. So when we start talking about batteries, for example, you can recondition the batteries, you can now put that for boost to the grid. And when it comes to recycling lithium-ion batteries, there are only 2 companies that know how to do it. One is Scandia. So you could partner with them. And then, as we start looking beyond the humble car, what about flying cars? So over in Germany, but also Dubai, Florida, and everything else, we already have cars that fly. They're actually drones, like Volocopter. Okay, quick question. Who owns Volocopter? Volocopter is a flying taxi company. Who owns it? Anyone? Mercedes. Look that one up. So when I say, how much do you know about your own industry? How much do you know about what the manufacturers whose products your livelihoods depend on are doing? Hopefully, I've just given you a load of surprises. But you now know. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope it provided you with some actions and some next steps and some insights you didn't have before. And it's been a pleasure being here. Thank you.